So I'll start by thanking the sponsors that we have. I've been lucky enough to work with a lot of these firms for years, back when I ran Tier1 Research. But it's awesome to be able to reconnect with great people and new people, and the fact that they're putting on an awesome event tonight. Thank you to Layered Tech for that. Sealed Mindset is like a country club for gun owners. So how many of you in the room are going to join tonight? Perfect. So we got about a third of the audience that'll be there. So thank you. And thank you to Layered Tech. Thank you to AT&T, Digital River, AppFirst, Augusto, and Akamai. So BigCloudSales, cool logo, huh? Looks like all the other cloud logos that you've seen in the world, and it's meant to indicate we help companies grow revenue by selling to large firms. And the little comment box looks like a tweet, meant to represent that we come out with some interesting opinions. So today in this next 27 minutes, you're going to hopefully hear some very interesting opinions about what cloud means to the Fortune 500. Of all the cloud events that go on, I'm sure all of you in this room have been to several even in this past month, because there's so many of them. We want this event, as it grows and matures, to become the only event that focuses the discussion just about the Fortune 1000. Large companies, totally different needs than the SMB of the world. And we're growing thanks to all of you. So Richard Dym doubled the size of our firm last month. So he's sitting in the back with very cool glasses. Say hi to him if you haven't throughout the day. But that was our big news, we doubled. In terms of my background, a lot of you know me already, so this will be quick. But I've essentially was born into the hosting industry. Financial guy from Wall Street, Piper Jaffray locally here, went out to Goldman in New York, lead analyst covering this sector back in '99 at the heyday. Then left, started Tier1 Research, built that to a 10-person firm, sold it off to the 451 group, where they still take good care of it. Then ran a hedge fund managing money for a lot of the hosting executives for about 4 years. Succeeded at that, but wanted to go back into something new and different, which was actually putting on an operations hat. So I was VP of Enterprise Strategy at Rackspace for 3 years before starting BigCloudSales last fall. And what I've done over this time is talk to customers. If you remember this famous scene from Office Space, while I was at Rackspace, I probably did one-on-ones with about 300 firms in the Fortune 1000. They all have similarities. They all have uniqueness of what matters to them first and foremost. But the big disconnect I saw from every meeting was what they were expecting out of a company Rackspace. So for the 3 years I was there, they went from $500 million in sales to 1.3 when I left. That's big growth. And you would think a $1 billion firm would be very mature. No, and not to rip on Rackspace, it's true of all the cloud companies in this industry. Even the cloud departments of some of the biggest firms, they don't necessarily operate and know how to have that discussion with the CIO or chief technical architect or whoever it is at these big firms. Those big firms may not even want to work with you, or may want to work with you, but may not care to go through the effort of procurement, contracting, and just seeing if you're a relationship that they want to have. That's really what it comes down to. So our existence is to help cloud firms of all sizes be able to have productive outcomes with the Fortune 500 and the like by letting us educate them on the core strategy of what these big firms are doing. So we don't teach you how to sell, we don't teach you what you sell, we teach you what the buyers are interested in from the Fortune 500. And here's an interesting chart that anyone in sales has seen. The highest value sale should be in the upper right-hand corner, where you're advising them. They have a ton of risk, and you have and they need a lot of knowledge. That's where you can do a consultative sale. The cloud industry today, and my first point to convey to you, it doesn't do that. It's not that the people aren't capable of it. There's millions of dollars being spent by big firms where they haven't even talked to anybody. And is that right or wrong? Well, that's good, but you don't know what's going to happen with that customer. When you start seeing $1 million a month customer go to zero and you didn't have a relationship or a discussion with them, that's a dynamic that won't be healthy, won't be sustainable in the cloud market. But there are some examples like that. So we want to help you stand out for being smarter. And essentially, if you want to talk to Richard and I and hear a little bit more about what we do, this is my last advertising slide. We help you know what the company did. Think of Target, think of Starbucks, think of Costco, think of Weather Channel, big firms. What did they do? What do they do now? What will they do? And where we add the most value? What things they haven't announced that they're going to do that we believe they could and will, and why they can succeed at it. All right, the quick 101 slide on cloud. If your house is on the left, anything else is a cloud. For those of you that actually haven't logged into any of the cloud platforms, here's inside of Rackspace's control panel. So now you can actually say you've seen the inside of a cloud. It's nothing different than a pretty UI that's easy to navigate, like the early days of your Windows operating system. And if you want a good example of what an API is, for those of you that may not be on the technical side, if you've ever been to Which Wich, the restaurant, it's like Subway, but instead you get a little paper bag and you scribble out, I want this on the sandwich, don't put that on it, slice it or don't slice it. The API request is the person that actually fills out that list of what they want. What they'd love to do is put it on that messaging queue, because that's where the bakers are that are going to make your sandwich. But they can't. They have to go bring it up to the counter. So the message queue, that's where they walk it over, they talk to the scheduler, and the scheduler goes and accesses compute, network, and storage. That may be a dumb, simple example, but truly the intelligence and the key things that are happening in cloud are all around the API. So when I was at Rackspace, one of the things we came after Amazon with was saying that their APIs may be awesome, may be great, but they give you lock-in just like anything else. And Rackspace and every part of the OpenStack community was trying to say, use the OpenStack APIs and it will liberate you, because any application you run there, it will speak to the OpenStack cloud at AT&T, at HP, at Rackspace, at anyone else that runs an OpenStack cloud. Well, there's some truth to that, but I'll get to a punchline later on that says it's not that easy. The sophistication and the big decisions, the big spends, and the big stronghold that cloud companies have will be around and stem from APIs. So we still have this industry where 90% of spend on IT is still something that happens in that in-house data center. Well, that's changing, but it's changing slowly. And I'm not one of the analysts that works at Gartner, and every projection I have has to go from a tiny market to a multi-billion or $10 billion market in 3 years. The reality is this market's going to continue to grow. And it's not just about productivity, but that is the reason why this whole industry is interested. But here we have Gartner projecting that this is a big industry, way bigger than it actually is. Half of this huge number that's over 100 billion is from business process as a service, which includes all of Google's revenue. Now, no offense to Google, but Google's AdWords is completely different than Google Compute. And if anyone disagrees with that, I think you need to have a talking to. But if you're going to size this market, and they break it down to say the actual compute part is over 6 billion. Again, not to just rip on Gartner, they're making a big assumption. But we all know now that Amazon, which is everyone knows is the leader, they report their cloud business, all of AWS, in the North American Other channel. Well, the biggest it could be for 2012 was 2 billion. The biggest it could be. Run rate from Q1, 2.4 billion. The run rate going into second quarter when they reported, I'm expecting that they're going to go from 2 billion in 2012 to something well above 3 in 2013. But if they're only 2 billion in 2012, whereas Gartner says it's a $6 billion market, how is that possible? Where are all these others? Well, let's go check. IBM, big company. Here's their brag stat from their website. 2,000 private cloud engagements, 4.5 million daily client transactions, 1 million managed virtual servers, 80% of the Fortune 100. They own this market. Well, wait a second. So here's the IBM page where I go to sign up. No, you have to request an invite. It's worse than beta. You still got to go call your IBM rep, take a meeting, go through a long sales cycle. Now, no offense to what IBM's cloud is or will ever become. It might be the one that rocks the market. But it also isn't there today, and you can't go use it. So what people are doing? So Phil Mickelson didn't win this weekend for fathers that watched or wives that watched. IBM's been powering the masters, and that's obviously one of the most perfect examples of a cloud workload. For that weekend, millions and millions of people are going to the masters.org. But every other day of the year, there might be 2 people that are just checking out the date for when it is next year. Perfect workload. But what are they really doing? IBM's been just committing a whole bunch of ton of physical gear to let them burst into. And then IBM manually has deprovisioned it in the past and tried to turn it over and make it usable for someone else. That's not cloud. At least that's not a cloud that's going to be profitable or be around in the future. So if it's not IBM that makes up most of this market for those big firms, maybe it's these smaller brand names. Here's DreamHost. Oh, but wait, that same problem on the bottom. Sign up now to be able to be invited to the beta program. These aren't clouds that compete. They might, but they don't today. So my argument is this is not a $6 billion market in 2012, as Gartner says. It's closer to a $3 billion market. And so if I'm going to do a pie chart on this, well, here's one pie chart that's dominated by somebody. Here's another one. But what it really gets down to is this is Amazon's pie. And very few people have a pie slice. So if this world's going to change and be as big as we think it is, for IBM to buy companies for $2 billion, and other companies that will acquire, that's what needs to change in this industry. And what's going to change it? It's the Fortune 1000 buyer. There's a reason why these big firms haven't tried to push their cloud yet on the Fortune 1000. Because the Fortune 1000 has been happy to go continue to buy gear, continue to license software in the way they've done it for decades. And until that changes, there's no incentive. Because all they have is revenue to lose. So it takes someone like Amazon that was just a game changer, and for them, cloud's got a higher margin likely than their core retail business online. It's the biggest competitor you could worry about. Well, let's get into a couple things. So if I was going to say who is the winner, I knew it's a retailer. Why is Sears in this business? They can't, just because they're similar to Amazon, try to go turn their old factories and warehouses into data centers. They're going to try. They're definitely not going to succeed, in my opinion. But so the real winner, as we all know, is Amazon, and it's up to this industry to go change that. Here's an interesting bumper sticker. My other computer is the EC2. So when I say the inflection point here is going to be the big adoption from the Fortune 500 and such. If you go to the pricing page on Amazon, and have any of you done this? Gone and looked at their pricing example? A few of you. In the lower right, this is for their support package. The example customer in that pricing example for business support spends $85,000 a month. Do the math, that's $1 million a year customer. Surprise, there's not a lot of $1 million customers on a true public cloud today. But the example on enterprise support, they use an example of a customer spending $1.2 million a month. There's less than this many clouds out there that have a customer like that. And I think it's I think it's only Amazon that has that kind of customer that spends over $1 million a month on true public cloud. So what does that mean for IBM, AT&T, these big firms that have huge revenue? I would call it at risk, but AT&T, who's here, they're going after this market. They've been in this market. They were one of the creators of it, been one of the leaders of it for a long time. IBM they lost it, now they're coming back and acquiring. But one of the obvious challenges, and having been from Rackspace, we were a co-founder of OPENSTACK. Now I'm just an innocent bystander, and now that the Kool-Aid has been flushed from my system, I get to look back at what is OPENSTACK. Well, here's the joke I used to always make about it. If you've seen Animal House, you remember this infamous story where he had to choose how to treat this young, lovely lady, and he had advice from a devil and an angel. Well, in the cloud world, every CIO and every decision maker has a proprietary cloud, the devil, which might be Larry Ellison or whoever you choose to think is the most proprietary cloud out there. And then the wisdom of this free and liberated world that frees us from all these proprietary lock-in points of our past. Well, it's not that simple, but that story has merit. So if you're trying to decide what's going to change it, we've identified so far, key takeaways were it's the Fortune 1000 that will decide if anyone else can get a foothold in this market. Generally speaking, the sales reps that are trying to sell against AWS are not the well-trained sales reps of the world. We want to be one of the solutions to that. But here's 5 things to share with you. And if anyone in here has 6 fingers, my apologies. That's rude, but anyway, that was meant to be a quick joke. The cloud perspective. So this guy on an island, he says boat. The guy in the boat says land. Different perspectives you might have in this room. Some of you are vendors that compete here. I may have offended you already. I may not have, so let's move on. Amazon, to them, their perspective is the world is their oyster. They don't see anyone coming after them and trying to challenge them in a real, meaningful, sustained way. They're the ones getting those $1 million customers to the extent they're out there. For Rackspace, they're one of the success stories from independent small firm that started up over a decade ago. To them, it's me against the world. They're just going after fanatical support, the opposite of the way Amazon sells support. For Microsoft, if you remember the Breakfast Club, he walks off to this, "Don't you forget about me." They've been in this market for a long time, and they've been selling to lots and lots of businesses. I would argue not all of them are paying for it. I think they're being given it away as long as they renew their enterprise agreement for Office and whatnot. So is that a real cloud player? Debatable. Is that a real data center? They've spent billions. It absolutely is a real data center, a real platform. But I wouldn't say they're even on top of mind for most people when they're looking at creating something big and new. Then VMware, if you remember Zima, something different. VMware's coming into the public cloud market. They'll be out there formally from what it sounds like, 3rd quarter, 4th quarter of this year, including in other nodes of the globe. Are they smart or dumb for coming into the public cloud market? A lot of the companies in cloud have built a vCloud strategy or built their cloud platform on it. It's been one of the most trusted enterprise brands. Again, that's what we're talking about here, the Fortune 1000, the big companies who spend millions of dollars with VMware. Well, a lot of those enterprise agreements are coming up for renewal. At least from the investor discussion, that's the biggest risk for VMware, is that they don't get these enterprise agreements for the software license renewed for the on-prem portion. Well, EMC and VMware together now get to go out to the market and say, if you renew that, you can burst into this cloud. We won't even charge you for it. Take the Microsoft tactic of, we'll give this away because you're buying X. That alone isn't a bad strategy. It's what big companies have done for decades and will continue to do, is find something they can give away where they can make good margin. But it's just an interesting dynamic that they will steal away what would otherwise be good business. They went and did a partnership with SAP. Amazon was the first and only to really be in the SAP market for being able to run SAP workloads on a public cloud, and they've been around for over 2 years doing that. Well, that's one of the first announcements that VMware made about their public cloud. I think that is a brilliant strategy, and I think it is something that can help make a dent, at least, in taking Amazon's gain away. And I would advise any cloud company that can go after those types of workloads, find a way to optimize your cloud for the SAP and Oracle workloads, because those aren't going away in the next decade, as good as all the SaaS firms are. There's IBM's perspective on the world. Everything old is new again. So again, IBM, by my estimates, when I ran Tier 1 Research and we published on hundreds of companies our estimates by quarter, I had them peaking out around $1.2 billion in revenue for true hosting that competed with the likes of Rackspace and AT&T and Layered Tech. Well, now they've just acquired Layered Tech. The best estimates out there, they're about 450 million. They paid $2 to $2.5 billion for it. But I don't believe they're over $1 billion in revenue. So how could they have come from 1.2 billion peak, well below, now they're acquiring it back. So now they're a $1 billion player, but in this announcement they said cloud's gonna be $7 billion for them in a couple of years. Going from 1 billion to 7 billion? How many SMBs does it take to screw in a light bulb? It takes too many, it's not possible. The SMB engine in this industry continues to grow quarter after quarter and will for anyone that's in it. But getting that kind of growth, going from $1 billion whatever to 7 billion, that won't just happen, or else IBM has a Gartner type definition of what is cloud. That's not wrong, that might be how they do it, but IBM still needs to do something new. In Google's perspective, like Wayne Gretzky, they got into pass first as well, and they just literally came out with their compute earlier this year. They're not too late though. Look at the kind of advantages they have with their cloud platform. We're going to start talking during lunch. Augusto, Google's partner in Minnesota, going to bring Google Glass to demo, or actually let you try it during the breaks. But the kind of things that could be developed on top of Google, whether it's maps, as simple as that, or anything in the email and apps and the documents, there's so much of a different type of app that would want to go build on Google and only Google. I think those are just interesting perspectives. So in the 10 minutes, I got 6 different slides where I have 3 takeaways. So if you're taking notes, hopefully it'll be easy to, because you boil it down to one slide with a few words. But the big cloud realities. First one you see here is enterprise win does not equal one app. In the Fortune 1000, I didn't come across a company that said they had less than 500 applications. And so, again, whether I'm Rackspace, whether I'm Layered Tech, whether I'm AT&T, getting them to choose one of those apps to go put on my cloud, that's not enterprise success. If you can't find one champion out of a 100,000 person company, then you're probably just not fun, or you have the wrong thing you're peddling. So finding one app to get hosted there is not the way this is done. And the converse of that, the Fortune 500 doesn't necessarily want to buy just one app. Why would they go take a gamble on a firm that's not an IBM brand, an AT&T brand, a big company brand, if it's only going to be for one little application? The CIO never gave a crap about a hosting discussion or a cloud discussion until cloud came along. Then they had to go figure out, what is this? I need to be involved in it. I can't just shove this decision for who to host with 4 legs down the ladder. So interesting. Second one, I had a lot of these companies that would come in and say, well, I'm so-and-so XYZ Fortune 10 company, and I'm not going to use your cloud unless you give me a $5 million, $10 million limitation of liability cap. And the sales reps goes, I'll take that to my finance department. I'll whimper in there, and they'll come back and say, no. Well, they usually say no anyway to those kind of requests of whatever the amount is. But you can't give someone who's spending $40 a month, however big of a brand name they are, that kind of liability coverage. It would be ridiculously dumb for a cloud company to do that. And my advice to the enterprises of the world would be fearful of a company that would be willing to put themselves on that kind of exposure legally for all the data that could be out there and things that could go wrong. And the final one, support does not equal no one logging in. I'll tell you that example in a second. So to remind you of those 3 points, here's some different websites from Pfizer. All of these have different backends. All of these have a login. All of these are something that could be meaningful, needs to be secured, real data behind it. And that's just 9 out of thousands at Pfizer. If you can get one of those in your cloud, you get to brag, yay, I got a Fortune 100 company. But Pfizer may be looking at that totally different perspectives. But the person that gets a cloud platform decision from Pfizer will meaningfully move the needle. There will be millions of dollars a month be spent by Pfizer whenever they choose to go cloud. Liability, play at your own risk. But the scope of support, that third of 3 points, if you go to, again, Amazon's site on the support page, this last one, AWS support does not include performing sysadmin tasks. When you talk about support, all they're going to do is stay with you on the phone and tell you how to log into the server, for you how to go fix it. That's not support. And again, going back to those examples of enterprise support, if you spend $1 million plus a month, you better get more than somebody standing on the phone talking you through how to do it. This is something Amazon can change overnight just by changing their policy. Rackspace had a policy where you couldn't go in their data centers, and that pissed off a lot of customers that just said, then I won't work with you. Well, at AWS, it's they won't log into their servers of their customers, which some would view as more secure. But that's definitely not support. So again, 3 cloud realities. 3 cloud big ideas. Smart shopping carts, the Ritz greeter glasses, and no more instant replay. Let me tell you what those mean. So here's the static image that's made its rounds about Google Glass. And again, I'm excited for all of you to be able to see it today. But he gets some information popping up about the person that he's looking at by facial recognition, grabbing information that he's chosen to store or that the web's able to make a public call to. Well, what's interesting is Las Vegas has already made a recommendation that casino floors do not allow Google Glass. Just think about it. Set up a little app of, I'm looking at this, it's sending the image of what my cards are to the person that's over there. We know how to bet and try to take some money from the casino. So you will see signs like guns banned on this premise. You will see Google Glass banned on this premise. Interesting that that is going to be something that the government also has to decide upon potentially, but also individual businesses. Country clubs like this that are beautiful, they may not want the aesthetic look of it because they don't want you on cell phones anyway. If you're already talking into a blue piece, anyway, there's a lot of things that could go good or bad, but the opportunities for the apps there, anything that's going to piss off government, there's an opportunity to create something as long as you can do it legally. But here's a way glass could be used correctly. Ritz-Carlton, they're infamous for having an academy to teach people how to greet you, how to do customer service right. And it's worth the money investing in sending your team there if you want to. But imagine them being able to use it, that they know you're coming in at a certain time, you arrive, certain information can pop up there more than just the name. And that's what they're great at so far is saying, hello, Mr. Schroepfer, let me take you in and get you to your room. How cool, that would be a perfect use for Google Glass. Then the other big idea for what could make cloud immensely huge, NFL and Nike. Instant replays, if you watch NFL, you get, that's 2 minutes of anxiety if your team's got a big play that's gonna be a touchdown reversal or not. The sensors that they can put in gloves, in the hat, in the shoe, in every part of the goal. There's no need for an instant replay. They'll just be able to have a body scan that watches every corner of the end zone. That's starting with football. There are millions of dollars, I guarantee. They haven't announced this, they haven't disclosed it publicly, but if you just tie the dots together, the kind of research we want to do for you, there's going to be tens of millions of dollars spent on trying this out. It'll be years before this is real in NFL, but I could see this absolutely being tested out 5 years from now, 4 years from now on the preseason games. This will be cool, and there will be a ton of infrastructure built behind this, both in stadium and connecting externally. And you tie that into fantasy football, endless. We all know about the second screen strategy, so if you're a fan of AMC's shows, I love all of them. The Killing just came out with the 3rd season. They actually are doing a better job of tying you in. They're actually sharing information with you real time about the story, not just asking you to click an ad in between or whatnot. The second screen is going to be huge for anyone that's a participant in it. Oh, and the smart shopping carts, I didn't have an image for it. Why don't retailers make an RFID outline of their store, connect that to each cart, have a weight sensor in the cart, so that as you're going around, it actually sees what parts of the store you went by, so they can know, even though you didn't buy a certain thing, maybe it's because you didn't go buy that part of the store. And once you get to the checkout counter, they're able to see what you chose to buy, and then you can map that against all the things that you walked by. The kind of information, so JCPenney's gets ripped on, or at least their CEO got kicked out for that store-in-store model. But you look at all the Champs, the Dick's Sporting Goods, all these sports equipment retailers, they have store-in-stores as well. Well, why do you think those aren't working? There's no reason why they couldn't put a camera and try to do at least temperature mapping to see how many people even walked by my Nike store-in-store. That would be a simple thing they could do. But the store-in-store concept seems to be taking off broadly across retail, and there's so many infrastructure things that can help the retailer and the store-in-store vendor be able to do a better job. Those are some big things that you should try to go get into the discussion with at the Fortune 500. Everyone knows people are going mobile. There's only 9% of the Fortune 500 that don't have an app in an app store of any kind. So basically that's an obvious discussion, but there's a data point for you to bring it up. Some observations. So I start by saying the dinosaurs have had time. So why is this an interesting time? It's not just because IBM spent $2 billion buying SoftLayer and all the rumors of who's going to be next and who's HP going to buy, is Dell going to go private, and what are they going to do once they're private. All of those things are interesting fodder for the only reason they're starting to act is that Amazon is starting to get big enough deals with the big enough companies that are going to displace big revenue. That's the real takeaway, in my opinion, of what's changing now and what's going to continue to change that pie, which again is owned by Amazon, in my opinion. As that grows, if anyone wants a pie slice, you got to find a way to go kick the dinosaurs or beat the dinosaurs to it. But they are noticing now that real revenue is being spent elsewhere. And what I noticed on all those conversations I had while at Rackspace, the big companies aren't afraid to spend money, at least from a perspective of a company at Rackspace's size or smaller. They got money. Saving them a couple $100 or thousands of bucks versus their VMware on-prem solution to go to a hosting model or a cloud model, it's not that it doesn't matter. Budget savings will always help, but they're just not wanting to spend money with you. That's what I learned from people that would share that. They have money to go do this, and if they could save it, they just have to choose to want to work with you, Mr. and Mrs. Cloud Company. And the final one, interesting that all the big companies chose to go with the platform as a service offering first. And now they're all coming into infrastructure as a service. Like there was a big rumor, when's Microsoft going to launch their infrastructure as a service? Reality is it's been out for a year and a half. They just chose not to acknowledge it as that because that would have been admitting that they were wrong in betting on PaaS first. But so did everyone else that was big. And now all the infrastructure as a service players are starting to figure out how do I get into platform as a service? Well, yesterday Savvis bought AppFog. Another example, recent example of they're trying to go upstack. Well, it's just an interesting trade-off. But you see no more of this. This used to be the Fortune 500 CIO meeting, and now people are taking their head out of the sand, they're paying attention, they've needed to understand it, but now they're acting on it. But the big guys are no longer comfortable. They were able to sit back and just resell hardware and software forever. They can't. So here's a different perspective. Werner Vogel's from Amazon. He thinks enterprises should act like startups. But a survey, 83 people, half of them said they have no interest in re-architecting anything. Well, of all of the IT spend, of all the thousands of apps, if half of them are not under consideration, you got to focus on the other half. Again, perspective for you. But the money's there from these big firms, and this transition between PaaS and IaaS, one of my conclusions, I just believe PaaS is still too early. No point in wasting time on it yet. And by yet, I don't think there's going to be real revenue from the Fortune 1000 spent on PaaS en masse in 2014. Probably not even in 2015. That's just not where people are wanting to go yet en masse. So it's still too early. I believe there'll be less OpenStack. Almost everyone in that group is starting to fragment and fracture off of what OpenStack's intention was, which was AT&T, HP, Rackspace, everyone else. We're all going to run a consistent version of OpenStack. As we get through what's really happened, let's go to one slide here. Here we go. These firms' logos on the left have all either left formally, left in spirit, or left in hatred for it. This is a group of big guys that could have changed and made OpenStack different. Why do they not want to make it different? That gives people flexibility and freedom to be open. It's because the big money at stake. They wanted to have their name on the banner when no one was spending money on it because it looks good and it's easy for them to drop a few dimes in the bucket. Now that real money is being spent, do they want to have all their revenue at risk to be able to click something through RightScale or through Stratus and be able to say, move my workload over there because I can save 2 cents? They don't want it to be that easy. So they're going to make it hard for it to be easy, and that's why you're seeing a fracturing of this. But to go back, here's an Orbit screen. We've all gone and booked our flights here. For those of you that traveled in, thank you for that. But what if all the cloud providers were across where the airlines are? And what if the SLA was from top to bottom? There's a whole bunch of different things that could make up the left and right axis. But this is a possibility. It just may not be because OpenStack is the unifier. It's all the troubled coding that might go on in the background that allows a workload to be, it's like taking a keynote presentation and making it work on a PowerPoint. That kind of translation is the guts and the goo of this industry that will make this Orbits interface possible, but it doesn't have to happen with OpenStack alone. So everyone feels like they need to fall in love. Those past players, though, they didn't say they're wrong. They were just too early to come into this market. And as we round out the final slides, Red Hat, to me, is going to be a huge surprise success story in cloud. And we can talk about it during the networking breaks. But if I had to make a prediction, look for Red Hat to do great things. And they spend no money with me. I'm not sponsored by them. So that's not me just pandering to somebody that's a sponsor. Second one of the first reports we wrote is that Workday is going to be larger than Salesforce.com, both in terms of revenue and valuation. You look at the system of record and the importance of that versus your customer records. Both are really important, but you actually get in trouble with the law if you lose employee records, and you may not get in trouble with the law if you lose your customer records, depending on the info. And if you want to read that report, just let me or Richard know afterwards. And this multi-cloud reality. There was an interesting thing that happened this week right here. So HP at their big event announced that they stole away Workday from AWS. Well, they should have tried to validate that first. And it sounds like it was factual that HP did win some of Workday's business. But anyone that sells in cloud or deploys clouds know that until a cloud provider has a node in every geography, and if they're selling to a company that's in every geography, that customer is going to have to find multiple cloud providers to be able to deploy in Germany and in the US and in Canada and wherever else. So this is really not big news, and they didn't leave Amazon in totality, and Amazon even clarified that, and so did Workday. But it's interesting that the world gets all fed up on that. No, by the way, Equinix, that's still where they colo a lot of their infrastructure. So why didn't they ask them? And is that part of the cloud discussion? Many different things you could look at, but there's gimmicks out there to watch out for. Just charging a customer by the minute instead of the hour, that got a few companies such as ProfitBricks fanfare, but I call those gimmicks. That's not changing the landscape in the context of a Fortune 500 decision maker. They don't care. At the end of the day, if a workload is only running for a second instead of a minute or an hour, there's ways you can find a value proposition to sell them on it, but that's a gimmick. That's not changing the game. That's not going to get them into the conversation if they weren't there. Brands are declining in value. We know this. Gaming is still hugely important. Here's an interesting photo if you want a chair for your spouse. You can sit together and play games on opposite computers. The final point, just to bring up in passing, pretty versus ugly, or pretty ugly if you say it fast. Infor, which is now led by a former Oracle rep, committed $500 million to go make Infor be a refreshed, pretty user interface. That's a huge spend for a company of Infor's size, wanting to go and change the game from just being owned by SAP and Oracle and challenged by SaaS players. Well, it'll be a year before you see the outcome of that, but that'll be an interesting experiment to see, can one of these dinosaurs in ERP software transition and create at least a user experience that rivals the Workday and the Salesforces and all these different SaaS applications that we love engaging with. But for now, people are still going to be cheering for pretty instead of ugly and running from pretty ugly. So I'll end by saying thank you again to the sponsors. I hope that was interesting. I'm over time, so I'm not going to take Q&A live, but please do find me afterwards. And again, look for Richard. But I'll end with that and get Christian. Thank you for being a part of the inaugural BigCloud event in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We'll see you next year in March. To all of you, thank you. To our sponsors, thank you very much. Have a great night, everyone.